There were zingers and put-downs aplenty in the third and final debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. The line, though, that grabbed headlines came with the last roll of the dice in Las Vegas.
Sir, there is a tradition in this country that the loser concedes to the winner. Not saying that you're necessarily going to be the loser or the winner, but that the loser concedes to the winner and that the country comes together in part for the good of the country. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Trailing in the polls, Donald Trump raising the specter of a rigged election. Critics, some even inside his own Republican Party, are echoing President Obama's call for Trump to, quote, stop whining. So can the election really be rigged? Conspiracy theories aside, there are indeed outside forces at play in this campaign. WikiLeaks has been targeting Hillary Clinton's entourage. Russia has been accused in the hacking of emails that brought down the head of the Democratic Party. Cyber controversies that feed suspicions and paranoia in a campaign unlike any other. Could there be, though, lasting damage to the United States and its 240-year-old democracy? Today in the WENTE debate, Trump's talk of rigging. With us from Princeton University, New Jersey, historian Julian Zelitzer. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
From Los Angeles, he was a California delegate for Donald Trump at the Republican convention. Attorney James Lacey, the author of Taxifornia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Blogger Jean-Pierre Larochelle is also the director of the Political Forum.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us after burning what was in Paris the midnight oil for watching the debate, the WENTE debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, #F24debate. You'll recall the first presidential debate. Donald Trump there laid to rest his long-standing conspiracy theory that Barack Obama was born outside of the U.S. On Wednesday in Las Vegas, for the third and final one, he went what you could call the whole hog on talk of a rigged election.
Clutching at straws. As Donald Trump falls behind in the polls, the Republican nominee blamed his rival of disrupting his rallies in Wednesday night's debate.
She's the one in Obama that caused the violence. They hired people, they paid them $1,500, and they're on tape saying, be violent, cause fights, do bad things.
The real estate mogul was referring to two videos by the conservative group Project Veritas Action, presented as undercover investigations that have gotten millions of views. The clips featured Democratic operatives boasting of disrupting Trump rallies and discussing ways in which the vote can be rigged, such as bringing in outside voters from other states to cast ballots. Other widely circulating videos purport to show other methods. Theories a number of high-ranking Republicans support, including this party representative.
There's a lot of undercover cameras going around, and the Democrats at certain campaign headquarters have been caught ripping up the voter registration of Republicans. There's machines that are giving fraudulent conclusions. And it is a serious issue. If it's significant and widespread, remains to be seen.
In recent weeks, Trump has accused illegal immigrants of unlawfully casting ballots. He also claims electoral lists contain the names of dead voters.
More than 1.8 million deceased individuals right now are listed as voters. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, if they're going to vote for me, we'll think about it, right?
Websites like nonpartisan and nonprofit factcheck.org show voter fraud in the United States is rare. It cites a university professor who claims he found just 31 incidents of fraud in the last 1 billion votes cast. But for many Americans, vote rigging theories ring more true.
That absolutely appeals to the lowest common denominator. It appeals to the dark side, to conspiracy. That's just not the reality of what's happening on the ground here. Yes, again, there's no question that we have minor problems like pretty much everybody does. There's always going to be people who want to do bad things. But overall, the integrity of our elections are intact.
Still, Donald Trump isn't taking any chances. He's calling for supporters to monitor polling stations, raising fears of voter intimidation. Such illegal tactics were widely used in the past, especially against poor blacks and minorities, who tend to vote Democrat.
All right, let's begin with Julian Zelitzer. If you look back over the years, of course, there has been fraud in presidential elections. Is it possible to throw an election?
Well, right now there's no evidence that that's possible. So there's evidence of voter fraud in the past, most notoriously in cities like Chicago, which is often brought up as an example.
Yeah, there's an urban legend about 1960 and the state being thrown the way of John F. Kennedy.
Right, and in that case, there were actually recounts conducted or initiated by the Republicans that didn't turn up enough fraudulent votes to change the election. And there was other kinds of problems in conservative downstate areas that probably negated the whole thing. So even in that case, there isn't evidence that fraud was the way that John F. Kennedy won. And right now, it's very unlikely and difficult to do. The same aspect of our campaign system that is often frustrating, that it's decentralized, it's fragmented, that many local governments still have antiquated systems, make it difficult to conduct the kind of coordinated effort that Donald Trump is suggesting is taking place.
Of course, there is a recent precedent. It's fresh in a lot of people's memories. In 2000, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled along partisan lines to refuse a recount in Florida, where George W. Bush won by a little more than 500 votes in that state. It was the decider in that election. The bitterness lingered long. Was that a turning point, Jean-Pierre Larochelle, for democracy in America?
I think so, because studies have shown that had a recount taken place, the election would have gone the other way. But what was interesting in that election is the fact that even though Al Gore probably had a reasonable basis to continue contesting the election, he chose not to, and it's precisely for this sake of the integrity of the election and not to, unnecessarily delay the results of the election. And for the importance of democracy. And as far as the 1960 election goes, Newt Gingrich has gone on the talk circuit this week, and he asserted that there's a unanimous opinion among historians that the 1960 election was turned in both the states of Illinois and Texas, is what he asserted on the talk show circuit this week.
All right. James Lacey, let's go back to the 2016 election. First of all, do you think Donald Trump should, if it is a close race, act like Al Gore and be magnanimous about it, if you will?
Well, I've been patient. I have so much to comment on what the previous commenters have said, but I will take your cue for the moment and stick to 2016. There is an attempt to rig the election by corporate media. There's no question about it. And the reason that it's wrong is because, as the historian should support, the U.S. media and the First Amendment backers have a tradition of trying to be even-handed. It's expected that large news media outlets will stick by journalistic principles and be fair. But in this election, Donald Trump has gotten negative press by about a factor of 20-1. And we know for a fact, as a result of the WikiLeaks and other disclosures, that major corporate media has just stilted their reports in favor of Hillary Clinton. For example, at CNN, Donna Brazile provided the Clinton campaign debate questions prior to the debate. At CNBC, John Harwood, the debate moderator, gave advice to John Podesta, the Hillary Clinton campaign strategy leader, on campaign strategy. The New York Times gave editorial control to Hillary Rodham Clinton. We know that from WikiLeaks. The Washington Post gave John Podesta a heads up on a story about ethics policy. Steve Harvey, who has a television show, gave his interview questions in advance to Hillary Rodham Clinton. Univision moderators helped Hillary Clinton to understand questions in advance of a debate with Bernie Sanders. So there's way too many examples of this to go on and list. But the U.S. corporate media is absolutely in the tank.
Right, that's impacting public
the election.
That's
impacting. It's unfair.
That's impacting public opinion. But vote rigging is a different matter. Do you think there's going to be vote rigging?
Okay, when Donald Trump says rigging, he's not limiting it to vote rigging. So let's be accurate about what Donald Trump is saying. He's talking about a rigged election, and part of it is the failure of journalists to stand by journalistic principles. It's
really
way
because let's listen
now,
to Donald Trump.
James, coming back to your
James,
point.
I want you to hear what Donald Trump had to say on the campaign trail. This was Tuesday at a stop in Colorado.
Rig the election at the polling booths where so many cities are corrupt and voter fraud is all too common. And then they say, oh, there's no voter fraud in our country. There's no voter fraud. No, there's no voter fraud. People are going to be watching on November 8th. Watch Philadelphia. Watch St. Louis. Watch Chicago. Watch so many other places.
James Lacey, that is an accusation of vote rigging. That's what the words he used.
Well, we can speak to that as well. And this is an aspect of his overall comment about the election being rigged. Many of your viewers may not know that in the United States, a voter just presents himself at a voting booth. In most states, you don't even have to present an identification. All you do is you give your name to the person who's at the ballot box, and they look on a list to see if you're registered. If you're on the list, they have you sign, they give you the ballot. There's no other qualification. And if you're not on the list, they give you what's referred to as a provisional ballot, which can be counted. There are thousands of incidences in every election where those types of votes are abused. Now, do we know that it's actually going to happen in Philadelphia? Is there an actual conspiracy in Chicago? I don't know that there is. But to come back to the issue that you were talking about with Jean, about what happened in the election in Florida in 2000, here's the issue. When voting systems fail in the United States, and you have problems like you had in Florida, or you have people voting who shouldn't vote, it's the politicians who resolve the problem. And in the case of Florida, it was the Republican Secretary of State who certified that election in favor of George Bush. So this is where you had Democrats at that point who were supporting Gore, claiming that the Republicans were rigging the election. Now, I have to disagree with what John said, because the New York Times has gone back and looked at all the ballots that wasn't counted. And when they look at them in the appropriate way and do the count, George Bush still won the election. So it's inappropriate to say that with those extra ballots.
Jean-Pierre Larochelle, let me ask you.
There is evidence to the contrary.
Let me ask Jean-Pierre Larochelle on this.
Can't rig elections based on the fact that they're the ones that resolve the discrepancies.
All right, Jean-Pierre Larochelle, when you hear Donald Trump saying, watch Philadelphia, watch St. Louis, watch Chicago, what does that mean?
Clearly, he's talking about voter fraud. He's not talking about the issue of media bias. Now, they have also made the assertion that the media is biased and giving disproportionate time.
I'm not challenging that. I mean, why are you even saying I'm not?
Well,
I wasn't challenging that.
No, I'm just saying it was raised as an issue. And he specifically said, monitor the polling place. So when he's talking about monitoring the polling place, he's talking about voter fraud taking place at the polling booth.
That's that aspect of the rigging. And the other thing he's talking about, which is a bigger problem, is the fact that the media is 20 to 1 against
Let me bring
him.
in Julian.
This is unfair.
Let me bring in Julian Selitzer on this.
Yeah, I mean, first on the media, that's an open question, your interpretation of what's going on. There are many others who have commented on the enormous amount of airtime that Donald Trump has received, in part because many media institutions have seen that he's generated ratings, that this campaign has attracted viewers. So there's been a criticism from a very different perspective that they've been too light on Donald Trump and given him the kind of free airtime that other candidates don't obtain. There's also a conservative media that's also,
Donald Trump is a preposterous. I'm sorry.
Julian Selitzer.
You're being a good Trump surrogate. But there's also a conservative media world, which is pretty robust, that has been quite negative about Hillary Clinton and also given him a lot of favorable coverage. So I don't think that's clear that this is rigged in one way or another. And Hillary Clinton certainly doesn't receive positive coverage all the time. I think that doesn't capture the way this has gone. And the voter fraud has very clearly been part of his rhetoric. He warned the other day that people are coming into the country to vote for Hillary Clinton, illegal immigrants. He has talked about voter fraud possibly happening in inner cities, which is a place that he keeps targeting, as does Rudy Giuliani when he's speaking about this issue. And he talks about the voter ID laws, which most studies show there is very little, infinitesimal.
Well, let me ask you a question then. Do you dispute the Washington Post story cited by Trump that shows that 14% of illegal immigrants who aren't even citizens vote in our elections? You dispute that Washington Post story?
The most respected studies have shown 31 instances of voter fraud out of 1 billion ballots cast.
So you're saying that the Washington Post is not a credible source when they say that 14% of illegal immigrants vote in our elections?
It's hard to talk when you're just yelling over someone, but that's the problem with the campaign.
I'm just trying to get my point in.
Right. Well, I'm just trying to respond. So most of the established studies that have responded to these voter ID laws have pretty conclusively shown that it's not a major problem at this point. And so, you know, I just don't think the kind of fears he's raising have any basis in truth.
James Lacey,
you might not see the problem.
James Lacey, let me ask you on this, because James Lacey, Julian Selitzer brought up the point there about inner cities, and some see this as a dog whistle message, basically saying it's a message targeting African American communities. Is there a tinge of racism when he talks about places like Philadelphia and St. Louis and Chicago?
You know, one of the things that we haven't talked about so far, and that a question hasn't been asked about, is that on Saturday night in North Carolina, which is an important swing state, Donald Trump's field office in that state was firebombed. It was literally destroyed. Now, fortunately, it was a firebombing in the evening and no one was killed. But there were threats that were left and placed on the building, written on the side of the building after, to the extent that the structure still existed. So what we have is intimidation going on of the Donald Trump campaign out in the public and in swing states, real mean intimidation. We have people going to Trump rallies that are intentionally trying to disrupt them, and that's an abject fact. And we have a situation where we know that the media is completely in the tank with Hillary Clinton, giving her even the questions for the debates ahead of time so that she has an advantage over Donald Trump. When Donald Trump talks about...
My question was, is he stoking racism when he targets inner cities?
Let me just finish. When Donald Trump talks about rigging, he's talking about fairness. And this election is not turning out to be a fair election. The way that the media is handling things, the way that journalists is handling things, and the way that we even have a terrorist firebombing, and I don't think it's even been reported yet in this discussion until I have to raise it. That's significant. So we do have a problem.
Jean-Pierre Larochelle, your thoughts on the tone of this campaign and you know what this whole argument means more broadly?
I think that this is really sort of a clear tactic by Donald Trump, who is not really capable of handling or accepting the possibility of losing, and to give himself an out and essentially say if he does end up losing, that it was a rigged election and it wasn't his fault, because he has constantly made this assertions about, you know, people being winners and losers, and he's not a loser. And I think for him, it would be very hard for him to accept that he lost on his own merits. And so this is sort of a pretext.
We're going to pick up on those points when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.